Hello everyone, I'm Richard Boden, the head of Murzilli Consulting Business Unit and Drone Talks. So very welcome to one of our next interviews here in Las Vegas from the Commercial UAV Expo. With me is Christoph from Unisphere. So happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah.
How are you doing? How's the event for you so far?
Yeah, very interesting. So seeing the differences in the US, seeing the regulatory progress, but also a lot of different operators we do not regularly meet in Europe. So quite exciting.
That's cool. So you're based in Europe, I hear.
Yeah.
Maybe for those who don't know, maybe you can give a quick overview of who you are, how big you are, what you're doing.
Yeah, happy to do so. So Unisphere, we are a company based in Constance, which is pretty much south of Germany, directly at the Swiss border. So based in Constance, we are 17, 18 people at the moment. We were founded 6 years ago, and we started initially with a lot of consulting, supporting companies in doing SORA approvals, creating concept of operations, engineering, and we transitioned now over time to providing software for operations management, which is the case for drone operators, air taxi companies, and vertiport companies, as well as some weather-related topics, a weather information service, which we work together with some UTM companies, and we have data analytics for vertiport, site selection, design, and air taxi business case validation.
Cool, quite impressive. You're doing a lot, covering kind of all the different markets that we have now with the AAM, with the drones. So where do you see most of the traction at the moment? Is it more drone side, vertiports, air taxis?
Yeah, that's a good question we always ask ourselves as well. So we see that there's more and more drone operators becoming more mature, flying regularly, having commercial applications, and we call them drone airlines. So they get also more mature in their organization, in how they work. And a few years ago, there were only very little of them. And today we see more and more popping up. So I think there is traction, but still on a very low level. So it's not that every month there's 10 more of them popping up. And where we see a lot of activities at the moment is in the vertiport field. So we see that vertiport companies are now getting closer to market start, since the eVTOL is getting closer to certification. And in next year, maybe 2025, there will be first operations, and therefore crowd infrastructure needs to be in place, which means they start analyzing what are suited sites, how does weather impact my operations there, how do I need to design my vertiport in terms of approach, departure path. And one element, so not alone, is also the demand and what are good routes to be planned, but one element is always how does weather impact my plans. And there we support a lot of vertiport companies, and that's a quite growing business at the moment on our side, and that came more or less out of nowhere. So 2 years ago, that was not a topic, and now it has a lot of traction.
That's quite interesting, quite interesting. So basically, I could ask you, how is the weather? And you can tell me how the weather is everywhere around the globe, right?
That's exactly. So we have access to, with our partner Meteomatics and some other weather providers we're working with, we have access to historic weather data. And then we are analyzing on typically 5 to 10 years, how is the weather at that location? What are the prevailing weather conditions? And how does that impact planned air taxi operations? And therefore, we need to understand how will they be operated? What are their thresholds? What are the parameters they're looking at? And then we are evaluating the weather conditions with this concept of operations to come up with indications on the service availability. And we do also publish reports on that. So we did every year, there's one report, and the last one did focus, for example, on icing conditions. And then you see, Europe, in northern part, there's a lot of icing topics popping up, but also Munich in the winter term, and getting a feeling how much icing is it. So is it 10% or do we talk about 20%? And this is where we support the eVTOL manufacturers and the vertiport companies.
Awesome. So it sounds a bit like you are one of the enablers, enabling the industry to really do proper BVLOS flights, right? With all these updates that you need, the life changes that everyone wants to see and wants to have. That's quite impressive. I read somewhere that you just launched a new platform or new update of your service. What is new about that?
Yeah. So that's the other business. So not the data analytics anymore, but our operations and weather management platform, which we call Nova. And we had a product in market already 3 years ago, and that was used, for example, by the Swiss Post in their operations, or it was used by some of the eVTOL companies in flight testing, and that was specifically designed for a 7-day outlook, understanding weather conditions, identifying flight windows. And then we learned a lot with these initial customers. So what are their real pains? What are their requirements? And what we did now is we still focus on weather and evaluating the impact on flight operations. But now we enable customers in our platform to build a digital twin of their concept of operations. So meaning there's these drone airlines. They operate different types of drones. They have different use cases, and usually they operate in different countries or different areas. And all of that has its respective characteristics. So if you think about a fixed-wing aircraft versus a multicopter, they have different endurance, different flight time. Each of them has OEM parameters they need to take care of. And on top of that, they have regulatory requirements, or they have operational requirements popping up. And now a pilot must consider all of that in flight planning. And you can put this information into the platform, and then when doing a mission planning, we assess all of that, merge that together, and tell you with this drone in that country, with this operational parameters, that's the flight condition and that's the impact. And we would like to support companies in standardizing, in professionalizing this part, and also in the end has a lot of impact on the, if you think about the SORA and the OSAs related to that, weather is impacting quite a lot of them, and we support them in achieving that in a more structured way.
That sounds really, really interesting. It sounds like you also have a very good understanding and overview of what is happening there through all the different verticals in the market. That's quite impressive. Is it kind of a standalone tool, or is it kind of a built-in via an API that then the operators can use for their missions and their projects? How does it work?
Yeah, so we saw that the different customer groups have different requirements, and for the moment we designed it as a web application. So you access it as a SaaS solution in the cloud, and that's the solution designed for the drone operators. And at the same time, when talking with vertiport companies, they see it more as it has to be integrated somehow in an overall vertiport management system. So they're putting elements out of it and making that available through APIs. And in our software architecture, everything is designed with microservices communicating via APIs to each other. So we can also imagine that in the midterm, we're opening these APIs, and also OEMs often. So the drone OEMs, they do not build the hardware only. They have also the software, the ground control, and everything related to that. And sometimes they also like to offer operations related services, and they would like to plug and play weather into that as well. So on that end, we are open, but we see that the industry is not yet 100% sure what they want. How does weather evaluation or check look like? And that's why we have it available, but it's not that you go on the website and you just access it easily.
Yeah, you're just touching a point that I wanted to ask you about, because I see that you have quite of an impressive overview of what is going on in the industry, and you mentioned the challenges that exist in the industry. What do you see at the moment as the blocking points or challenges that everyone has?
Yeah, that's a good question. So speaking for Europe, we have most customers in Europe, some in Southeast Asia and some in the US, but mainly in Europe we see that so there's proven that drones can fly and drones can do different things like transporting blood samples or whatever. But now we're coming to a phase that these projects are not paid anymore by the innovation budget. They have to be paid by the core business that would like to incorporate drones in their daily business. And now they start realizing what drone operations cost for the moment. So I think the topic of costs related to drone operations, you have at least one pilot, you have visual observers, you have all the hardware. And I think that's, in many cases for the moment, this high degree of manual work related to flight operations is not beneficial for the profitability or for the business cases. And that's why I think we need a higher level of automation. This 1 to N, which is often talked about, I think is very crucial to bring the pilot costs down to multiple flights, to multiple drones. And I think that's one of the key issues. And another point is that we saw these innovation projects. We saw that there is now also interest in core organizations using that, but there's also a big time delay. So everything is very slow, and the companies, they need to grow, but not too fast, because then the contract might be delayed. And I think we're still in this early phase of market takeoff where everybody needs to learn a lot about it. That's quite challenging to manage the expectations on both sides.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think especially the manual work and the amount of manual work that we have in the industry is still quite a challenge. Actually, one other thing that was coming to my mind when you were speaking, I think especially your weather solution is quite interesting for traffic management as well, and U-Space that we have now in Europe. What do you think about U-Space? Do you think it's kind of the enabler also to help to digitalize, to automate, and to scale in the end?
So that's a good question. And I think if U-Space is there in the final stage of maturity, everybody's talking about the U4 and everything works seamlessly together. I think it can be a good enabler for that, but there's this chicken egg problem related to U-Space. So it's the first time a public service is given out to the private industry, and now we have to do a lot of upfront investment by private players, and at the same time, if they're still immature, the benefit is not that big to the drone operators, so they're not willing to pay. And if they do not pay, there will be not a lot of more maturity, and then I think we need to solve this. And Europe is doing well, so we have a lot of funding programs. There's a lot of activities in that sense, because they learned that if you expect such a technological step by the industry, you need to support them in doing so until they can earn money. But I think that's a challenge, because the industry learned something, then they are pushing the regulations, then the next level of the regulation is there, and then they need to catch up, and that's time consuming. And I think we need to live with that for the next few years. But when it's there, I'm convinced that there's a lot of positive things. The question will be then, how do you work as an operator a little bit? If you're in multiple countries, do you integrate multiple UTM in your services? How do you do it if you fly in rural areas where there's no U-Space available? But that's more operational topics to be solved. But I think when it's there, it's going to be quite interesting. But I think it's got to be a long time in between, and we need to learn what is required that these professional drone operators still can scale. Because some of them are on the way to get really big, and if they're now blocked by missing infrastructure, that's also not what we want to have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we see there are quite a lot of challenges, but I agree with you. I think there are some good potentials now coming around with all these things that develop. What I think was quite interesting listening to you is that there was basically, I haven't heard any blocker from your side so far when it comes to the regulation itself. So you mentioned that the regulation is there, the industry is now following up. I think that's kind of an interesting thing to see, that Europe is really ahead with the regulations, that the people can comply with it. And for sure, everyone has to find a way how to tackle it down and how to really deal with it in the end. Quite interesting state where we are here now. Would you have any message to the industry or to the operators where you say, hey, this is kind of the message you would like to broadcast to them, and saying, hey, get more digital and using software platforms? Or
I think there's one thing we often get contacted or confronted with is, okay, weather, is it really good enough for today's operation? And from our view, there's a lot of advancement in weather services. So speaking about Meteomatics earlier, they provide a 1 kilometer resolution model considering terrain effects in the weather models for Europe today. So that's there, and that's very accurate. A lot of things can be done with that, and I think people need to learn about this innovation and integrate that into their flight operations. And there's often like, but we should also have even more granular weather. We need more micro weather topics in cities. And I think in cities, that's really true. So if you think about you're flying in between high, tall buildings, and there's certain wind phenomena that lead to gustiness, that's a challenge, true. But where do all the BVLOS flights take place today? It's not in cities. It's doing inspection of linear infrastructure. It's connecting remote islands, or it's flying to oil rigs, offshore wind parks, whatever. So there's a bunch of applications that works today, and we need to start exploiting on that. And I think this is a very important message to them. So there's a lot of things there. And what we do, for example, with our simulation technology is we incorporate this high resolution weather data into the simulation of a flight and creating a digital twin of a flight, evaluating it for flight feasibility. And we have a very accurate understanding of the flight time, the impact weather has on the flight, the battery state of charge. And in that sense, we did also a research project together with the European Space Agency and Macronet, deriving out of historic flights a performance model, incorporating that into the simulation, and then checking the accuracy. How accurate can we model flights, and comparing that with actual flights they conducted. And we had 97, 98% accuracy on battery state of charge at landing and flight time. And that's really a lot if you think about many of the use cases today. And I think what is very important for the industry out there, so weather is a challenge. Weather is changing, forecasts are not always reliable, of course, but we need to handle that. And if you look at aviation industry, they also handle that with procedures, with good thresholds, with safety margins. So there's a lot of ways we can also apply to drones and learn over time. And I think often I hear that's something we need to be solved. But I'm not sure if we need to solve that for the first scaling of the industry. For sure, when we fly in cities, I completely agree if you have that effects. And also for eVTOLs, landing at a vertiport in between skyscrapers, whatever. Yeah, that's a topic. But if you connect an airport to somewhere else on the land side, I'm not sure if you need that. You have good sensor data and everything available today. And I think that's one message. Look what's out there today, combine that in a smart way, use technology, and then there will be much more possible than we see today.
It's quite a positive message. So I think it would be good to end with quite a positive message. So thank you very much for being here, for joining us. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and wish you all the best for the future.
Yeah,
see you again.
Thank you, Richard. Always a pleasure speaking with you.